explosions and flames.
Coming to you live from the Pacific Palisades.
The Palisades fire is still largely uncontained, and it's already the most destructive fire. What are your emotions like watching that happen?
Heart was like pounding like crazy. I mean, I've never fought a fire before.
I recently got the opportunity to go out to the Palisades to see the devastation that's been brought by the biggest wildfires in LA history. I interviewed one of the residents in the Palisades who managed to save his home, and we're gonna talk about everything that I've seen today. So let's get into it.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.
Guys, before we get into today's video, please like and subscribe. Yes, we've all been consumed with the news that is coming out of Los Angeles. Multiple fires have broken out all across the city, and hundreds of thousands of people are being impacted by this, displaced by this. Over 10,000 properties have been destroyed. Of course, the Palisades has been a major focus of these conversations and of the news because it was the initial location where these fires broke out. So I got the opportunity to go into the Palisades to see everything that lies on the other end of these fires. And honestly, we're not on the other end of it yet. These fires are continuing to go, and we're about to be hit with some major winds here in LA that is going to make the situation even worse. At least it's predicted to. I'm going to try my best to describe what it is that I saw, but I have to emphasize that it is so different to see this with your own eyes. Even with everything that I've seen on the news of how these houses have been destroyed, it's a whole nother beast to actually view it. To be honest, it was really weird to walk down some of these streets. Even though you're on the sidewalk and you're looking at all this destruction, it sort of feels like you're trespassing into somebody's homes because everything has been destroyed, and you can see the layout of where everything once was, where a family would have had their living room or their kitchen or their bathroom. There were literal bathtubs just sitting in the middle of the street where these rooms once were, chimneys that were lined up down the block where you could see where the houses once had structure. And what was really interesting was the indiscriminate manner in which this fire spread. On some streets, entire houses were taken out where their next door neighbors were fully up and seemingly functional without much damage. And that really speaks to the wild nature of the embers and how they travel in these wildfires. It also speaks to the ability for some to stay in their homes and save them as this fire is raging around them with hoses, using water from their pools, getting water from neighbors and communities that really band together to save as much of their property as they possibly could. The destruction that I saw was really unbelievable and definitely hard to describe. Amongst all of the houses that have been burned down with virtually nothing left behind, you're also seeing this with businesses and schools. And when you see a house that has managed to make it through this destruction, you're kind of wondering what that person or what that family is going to return to when around their pristine house is an entire community that has been destroyed. The air was smoky, chemically putrid in some areas, and you have to wonder about the ground, the land that people are going to be returning to, and how toxic that has become due to these fires. I saw a squirrel or a bird or two, which really makes you wonder about the ecosystems that live in these communities and how the animals have been impacted on top of the devastation to human life. What I expected to see, but really didn't see at all, was Palisadians going back into these grounds to visit their land and to see what is left of their houses. Now, there is, I guess, some leeway for residents to go back and visit their property with a strict curfew where they will be removed from the area after a set time, but I really didn't see anybody back there, which leads me to believe that it's a little stricter than one would imagine. But I did get to speak to one resident who actually stayed at his home and protected it as the fire was raging. He worked alongside his wife and his community members, his neighbors, to protect as much of their properties as they possibly could as the Palisades fire was raging in the background. His name is Mark Merrill, and you may recognize him, especially if you're a member of the gaming community, because he is the co-chairman and co-founder of Riot Games. He's responsible for League of Legends, Valorant, Arcane, so if you're familiar with any of these games, he's probably to thank. I got to visit him at his house where he told me all about his experience with the Palisades fires.
So fortunately, garden hoses are still really effective actually, because 90% of the houses burned down not because of the big firewall firestorm, but because of small smolders, which then become small fires, which then become big fires. And because they're unmanaged, because everybody evacuates, that then, is what causes a lot of the structural damage and property damage. And so Only reason I even came back was because my wife happened to organize a WhatsApp group about 8 weeks ago for our local area because some homeless people were starting to beat some people up and things like that. So there was a security challenge, which then motivated people to start to share information and to coordinate. And because of that, we were then able to share information when we all evacuated. There were a couple people who stayed back and we're sort of providing real information of what's happening on the ground in real time, not on, which is different than what was happening on the news or whatnot, or sort of like the social channels. And then I called my good friend who's a firefighter, one of my best buddies, and I was like, hey, dude, what should I do? And he said, if I were you, I would absolutely go. So came back here Wednesday morning with my father-in-law, my wife's father, and he had a gas-powered, he lives in Camarillo, and he had a gas-powered device that could also pool from the pool and had 200 feet of hose attached to it, 1.5-inch hose, and can spray a lot. And so when we arrived Wednesday morning, Tuesday night was a really crazy night. There were 4 fires on the property, and we were able to use the garden hoses and some buckets and a bunch of things to start to put them all out.
How long did that take you?
A couple hours, and then another neighbor happened to be coming by to help, and so we had 4 people at one point on the property, sort of helping out, and then the neighbors left, and then it was a lot about sort of managing the smolders and the flare-ups and saturating the property, and then trying to we didn't have any communication. And so, over the next day or two, it was then around how do we sort of hunker down and supply. Unfortunately, we had a generator that you can hear, that's diesel fueled. We sort of had this backup power scenario. We also have a solar powered battery. And so, but we didn't have a Starlink, unfortunately, but was able to go get a Starlink Mini, have it delivered, sort of walk it in and, then get comms set up. And that has really helped because now one of the things that happened is, so 2 homes burned on the hills above us. You can see on the hills, like the hillside would catch on fire.
Right.
A bunch of homes on the other side of this on Sunset, unfortunately burned. But there are 2 brothers that sort of held the line on that side. My neighbor Thomas over here did a great job, and his house manager, they lived together, and they were able to protect that. And then, because there was so much ash and smoke and whatnot in the air, again, a lot of the risk was sort of falling.
So you heard some of his firsthand experience about how all of this started and the decision to stay at his place and defend it. And he actually ended up giving us a tour so we could see the damage and what he was fighting on the other end of this.
All of this was on fire when we got here, which was not fun.
Yeah.
And
so what is that like for you can't sleep or you gotta be here all the time, sort of watching, right? To make sure. So you've been up for at that point.
Well,
how long?
we took shifts.
Okay.
And again, I was super fortunate to have my father-in-law here. He's 70, and on day one, I think his phone said that we did 25,000 steps and 150 flights of stairs, running up and around, and then to the neighbor's property because there was some stuff happening behind her house, and going across over here, and but then in the back over here, there was a bunch of stuff that burned too.
Yeah, let's see. What are your emotions like watching that happen?
Well, when we arrived, I mean, my heart was pounding like crazy. I mean, I've never fought a fire before, and I was we just sort of jumped out and got in action. The way I burnt my finger was, grabbing a log over here that was on fire because I didn't actually see the underside was on fire, but in kicking stuff to move it to try to disperse before it got, big. This is the wood pile and the fire blankets. This whole thing caught on fire, and that's when I started kicking it and dispersing, and then we were able to get a hose and bring it over. But that's all wood.
Yeah.
And so that's bad, right? And
Horrible.
So if that went,
Yeah, you don't know what you're
just
doing.
in time, because that would have burned for a long time, and then caught embers all over the place.
Is there any element of just since you're surrounded, not being able to gauge just how intense everything's happening? Yeah.
Which is where, when that house behind us went up, while these were happening, while there was the fires here and on the hill, I looked at my father-in-law and I was like, Dan, should we bail? Because I'm like, that's our route out. And that's when I was able to text, to my wife, who then got the fire ready. He's like, let's see if they're able to come and how they handle the situation. And when they came and they were able to prevent that from spreading, that security. But I think if that didn't happen, probably left or potentially been in a really bad situation.
Right.
But it's been watching the super scoopers come in. They were flying overhead, 2 of them, incredibly quickly, literally doing every 5 minutes, doing runs, going to the ocean, picking up and coming to deliver. And they did that for hours. It was really cool to see.
Yeah. It was one that was circulating in the Palisades area that was taken down by that drone. Was that here in this fire?
Oh,
or was
really?
that the Eaton fire?
I don't know.
I think they said they had 2 super scoopers, and one of them, somebody was flying a drone to get footage or something and took it out. Yeah.
Oh, no.
I think that was here.
But yeah, you can see like these homes, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's so crazy how like, we were talking about how indiscriminate it is. So just like one home is just completely fine and the others.
Well, and part of it is, you know, I really think of one of the big actions was how much did they pre-saturate in water, and then how effectively were people managing the small fires? Because the fire will burn itself out a lot of times. Like if something's really wet, it goes to the path of least resistance. And so it'll sort of stay, and if it burns out, then, you know, it won't keep coming. And so water is absolutely critical.
So even though this was Mark's first time experiencing firefighting, he clearly learned a lot and very quickly. And he actually had a general list of recommendations for those who are experiencing this or may experience it in the future.
Equipment list, procedures, like install your garden hoses, have them, you know, different parts of the property, you know, wear gloves, ensure you have a mask for breathing, you know, goggles, you know, some thick, fully length clothing, you know, have a pocket knife, try to get comms set up, get a generator. And this was the front, like it was coming really intensely this way, and fortunately we were able to like not have it fully come down the canyon. But if you go up into the Palisades like that way on Sunset, the whole thing is this,
Right.
except for like the Caruso Center, you know, in a couple areas that had really effective planning, and
Yeah.
like it's still totally standing, and that's 100% attributed to the foresight, the having the technology, you know, the retardant that they use. Again, it was like as intense as it can be. It's right in the center of the Palisades, and it survived.
Yeah.
So, and the fire station survived too.
Yeah, we saw that. And there was that one house that's going viral on X that just managed to stay there because it had like, you know, no foliage and the concrete, you know, brick and mortar foundation to it.
Yeah, a buddy of mine actually has like a designer kind of metal house, and I think is the one house on the street that survived. you know,
Yeah.
also.
It's just
So,
like, yeah, I think this is
materials
like
matter.
defensive architecture is going to be
Yeah.
huge. Huge.
He had a few thoughts as to what residents are going to do on the other end of these fires in terms of rebuilding, whether or not they stay or leave.
That's the sentiment I've generally heard. I think a lot of people are concerned around time, you know, and how long. Because, I mean, you know, this is going to be a massive long-term rebuild project, you know, and I imagine some people will likely just go elsewhere and
Yeah.
replant, so to speak.
So yeah, that was my experience going into the Palisades, and maybe I can get more coverage for you guys in the future. I gotta say, it is wholly different to see it with your own eyes and to talk to people who firsthand witnessed everything. You get this covered in the news, and I've consumed a lot of that over the past few days, but nothing prepares you for seeing the devastation firsthand and hearing these stories firsthand. And there's going to be so much more to discuss about this. Of course, there's a lot of politics and other issues that are being entangled in the conversation surrounding the wildfires. People are calling out Gavin Newsom, our mayor, Karen Bass. They're talking about the lack of foresight when it came to these wildfires. Even though we knew this was an area that was highly susceptible to this issue, there was a lack of brush clearance. We had water reservoirs that were out of commission. We had firefighters complaining that there were no water in the fire hydrants or not enough water pressure to make the fire hydrants work properly. And that's calling into question so many parts of our leadership. You're going to see ongoing conversations about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the culture in LA, the general politics of LA that may have made these situations worse on the other end of these wildfires. Of course, people are talking about the soft on crime policies that may contribute a bit to the arson that may or may not have contributed to these wildfires, the looters that are going into vulnerable areas, finding people's homes and robbing them as they are experiencing these wildfires, which is crazy and is absolutely happening. Not only are we seeing this in the news, but I've even spoken to residents who have had to fend off looters from their properties as police and law enforcement are busy with everything else that's happening in the city. So if there's more to talk about, we will be here to do exactly that. But I wanted to try my best to go and see this for myself and bring the information to you guys so that you can remain informed and you guys can get a little bit closer to the experience of the people who have been living in the Palisades and other Los Angelinos who are dealing with these fires and this disaster. Now I want to close out this video with a huge shout out to every single first responder who has put their lives on the line to protect our residents here and to fight these fires. It has been unbelievable to watch as people from all over this country have come out to fight these fires and to protect the people who are affected by them. Also, a huge shout out to all the community members who, in the wake of this news, bravely stood on their properties to defend themselves with nothing more than pool water and garden hoses. It was unbelievable to hear some of the accounts of what people did in order to save their properties. Some were successful, some weren't, but nonetheless, it's a valiant effort. We got to continue fighting, continue to hold people accountable for the mistakes that were made that led to this disaster becoming what it became, because there's so much of this, at least from my point of view, that could have been prevented. There's really so much more that we could have done. And the fact that this incident could have even been predicted really meant that we knew what we should have been doing and we weren't doing it. So hopefully in the coming days, we will figure out who is responsible and we will bring them to task over this. But I have to say, the outpouring of love and generosity that exists on the other end of this disaster has been so immense, so overwhelming. It's really wonderful to see human beings come together and work towards a common goal in the wake of devastation. It truly is when people become their most altruistic. And in a lot of ways, community members and people on the ground, people who we would consider to be on the lower rungs of leadership in this city and in this state, have really done their job better than our leadership, better than our administrators. And that's through love and community and showing up for people and having empathy. And that's been so beautiful to watch from so many different angles. People who've been directly impacted, people who haven't, people who are watching from the outskirts or even out of the state and are wondering how they can help. And that's the true message of this story, that human beings are resilient, they're caring, they're compassionate, and we can face these things as they come, even though in a lot of ways we shouldn't have to. So guys, let me know how you feel about this video and about the things you saw. Drop your thoughts in the comments down below and let me know what other angles you want me to cover this issue from, because as we know, this is going to be an ongoing thing that will be talked about for time to come. Guys, let me know how you feel. As always, if you disagree with anything said in this video, duke it out in the comments down below, but do so respectfully. We encourage healthy debate on this channel. And if you like this video, like, subscribe, click the notification bell to be notified every single time I post a video for you guys, which is every single day. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Shout out to everybody who's going through it right now. Bye, guys.
Yeah, you better. Yeah, you better.